Bangkok, Chapter 7. 1 hour and 43 minutes, and still no sign of my father. I had made one trip out of the country with Rolf, Mom, and the twins, London, 2 summers ago, and knew that you had to check in early for international flights. Where was he? What kind of errands was he running? What if he didn't show? And all of the other boring questions that run through your mind when you're waiting. I walked over to the flight information monitor, thinking that maybe our flight was delayed. On time, it read. Above the monitor was a regular TV. I glanced at it, and was going to turn away until the anchor said, "The state of New York has reached a plea agreement with Peak Marcello, the boy who climbed the Woolworth building early last week. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and fined a whopping $150,000. This is the steepest penalty ever given for criminal trespass in New York's history." The camera cut to a shot of the mayor getting into the back of a black limo. He turned to the reporter and said, "This should put an end to people climbing skyscrapers in the city of New York. This illegal activity will no longer be tolerated under any circumstances." Peak Marcello and his family were unavailable for comment, said the reporter, and it is believed the boy has left the state of New York for an undisclosed location. Not yet, I thought, turning away, grateful they hadn't run a photo of me. Peak! Finally, my father was pushing a huge cart with a mountain of gear piled on it. I trotted over. "Give me a hand." I helped him push the cart up to the counter. "What is all this stuff?" "I don't get to New York very often, and thought I should stock up on some supplies. Give me your passport." He put it down on the counter along with his own battered passport, which looked like it had been through the wash a couple of times. "You're cutting it a little close, Mr. Wood," the attendant said. "I know," my father said. "Family emergency." The attendant pointed at the cart. "This exceeds your baggage limit." My father took a credit card out of his pocket. "Just put it on this." By the time we had everything checked, we had only minutes to catch the flight. We were the last ones on the jetway. "I couldn't get us seats together," he said as we stepped into the airplane, "but at least we're both in business class." He pointed out my seat, then took his own, which was 3 rows behind me, and that's the last time I talked to him for 13 hours. We had a 3-hour layover at the Narita airport near Tokyo, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him there either, because he spent the entire time on his cell phone speaking in what sounded like Chinese, but it could have been Thai or Nepalese as far as I knew. He was still jabbering on the phone when we boarded the plane for Bangkok, where I was disappointed again to see that we were in separate rows. Another 6 hours passed. On the way to customs in Bangkok, I finally caught him between calls. "I'm really sorry about all this, Dad. You have to come all the way to the States, the money, being stuck with me." "Whoa," he said, holding up his callous climbing hand. "First, you don't have to call me Dad. I don't deserve the title. For the time being, let's just pretend I'm your big brother. Just call me Josh, like all my friends do. Second, don't worry about the money. Rolf and your mom put a big chunk of change in. I'll get my portion back. And finally, I'm not stuck with you. I couldn't be happier to have you with me. I just haven't had much time to show it because I'm trying to put something together." "What?" I asked. "A surprise, but in the meantime, no worries." We continued down toward customs, where there was another little problem. I didn't have a visa to enter Thailand. My father, Josh, took my passport and disappeared into a room with a couple of custom officers and came back about 10 minutes later. "We're in the clear," he said, hurrying through the airport toward the terminal, bypassing baggage claim. "What about your gear?" "We'll get it tomorrow." "No worries." Outside, we climbed into the back of a cab. We're going to Chiang Mai?" "Not yet. We'll get there eventually." It was well after midnight, but Bangkok was wide awake. The cabbie crazily swerved between bicycles, motorcycles, and cars for 20 minutes, finally coming to a stop in front of a hotel. Josh paid the driver, and we walked into the lobby where the concierge beamed at us. "Mr. Wood, I have your rooms all ready." He handed us each a key. "Okay," Josh said as we got into the elevator. "I have some more errands to do tomorrow. In the morning, I'll have a driver waiting for you in the lobby. 9 o'clock. He'll take you to the clinic for a physical." "Physical?" "Yeah, an immigration formality, and I want them to check your face and ear." He took my hands and looked at my damaged fingers. "We'll need to get those fixed, too. Anyway, I'll come by the clinic and pick you up when you're finished, and we'll be on our way. If I'm late, just wait for me there. Try to get some sleep. I don't want you to flunk the physical because you're tired." When I woke up, I didn't even know what day it was. Couldn't remember if you lost a day or gained a day in Thailand. I ate breakfast, went for a walk, and got back to the hotel and waited for my driver. The clinic turned out to be a huge hospital, and it took a while for me and the driver to find Dr. Wu's office. He was expecting me. In fact, it turned out I was the only patient he had that day. I had had physicals before, but nothing like this. Dr. Wu and his nurse didn't speak English, so they had to pantomime me through the battery of tests. I was x-rayed, CAT-scanned, and jabbed with countless needles. They put me on treadmills and stationary bicycles with so many leads attached to my body and tubes jammed in my mouth. I wouldn't have been able to ask them what they were doing, even if I spoke Thai. They must have drawn a quart of blood over the course of the day. They checked my eyes, ears, and mouth, and other holes I don't even want to think about. They took the stitches out of my ear. Another doctor came in and looked at my feet, knees, shoulders, hips, elbows, wrists, and finally my fingers, which he put some salve on and bandaged, then gave me instructions on how to do it myself, which I barely understood. By the time they finished with me, it was late afternoon, and I was so exhausted I wanted to check myself into the hospital as a patient. The nurse led me to the waiting room, and I promptly fell asleep on an uncomfortable chair. And that's where Josh woke me up sometime after dark. Apparently, he had been there for a while talking to Dr. Wu because he had a thick file in his hand, which I assumed were Dr. Wu's findings. Am I going to live? I asked groggily. No worries, Josh said. I'm not surprised you're in such great shape with my and your mother's genes. Let's go. We have an airplane to catch. I was looking forward to Chiang Mai, where I could finally get some rest. His gear was waiting for him outside the airport, guarded by a porter the size of a sumo wrestler. He paid the porter, wheeled the cart to the counter, and said, "We're booked on the flight to Kathmandu." I wasn't sure I'd heard him right. Did you say Kathmandu? Right. I thought we were going to Chiang Mai. We will, he said, as he transferred gear to the conveyor belt, but we have a stop to make first. He must have bought the gear for someone in Kathmandu. Actually, a couple of stops, he added as he threw on the last box. Where's the second stop? I asked. Everest, he said. I stared at him. For a climber, saying that you are stopping by Everest is like saying you're going to stop and see God. Josh was grinning at me. I didn't want to tell you until I had it all worked out. Your physical was the last hurdle, and the Chinese visa. Kathmandu is in Nepal, I pointed out. Right, Josh said, but we're not going up the south side in Nepal. We're going up the north side in Tibet. You have to be 16 to get a permit to go up the Nepalese side. The Chinese aren't quite so picky. They don't care how old you are as long as you pay the fee. And then there are the 25 clients I have waiting at... I'm climbing Everest? I asked, more stunned than I've ever been in my life. I don't know if you'll make the summit, he said. But if we get you up there before your 15th birthday, you'll be the youngest person in the world to ever stand above 29,000 feet. He picked up the tickets and started toward the gate. I followed him numbly. He didn't have to ask if I wanted to go. Every climber in the world wants to summit Everest, or at least give it a try. On the airplane, Josh waved me in the window seat and sat down in the seat next to mine. The plane backed down from the jetway. Does Mom know about this? I asked. No, but I'll give her a call. No worries.